I'm really glad that some people were coming to come on and talk about this particular issue. Abdul Osmanu, the Hamden legislative counselor who is endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, but you are as a Democrat because there's no party line. It's not a political party, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Mars Rodriguez, who's the co-chair of the DSA in Hartford. Is that
Yes.
correct? First of all, thank you for coming on.
No,
have you guys done a lot of TV and radio and
Not
podcasts?
actually.
I think this is like my third on TV. Have done like a few on radio, but yeah.
And I want to basically, because I'm going to ask some sort of basic questions, and you can define it for yourself. If you want to jump in on each other, please do. I think first and foremost, like, how do you define democratic socialism?
Yeah, I think there are a myriad of definitions that the average DSA member would probably even give you. But I think what really unifies democratic socialism is the belief in a democracy-based path towards socialism. One that is where power is built through the ballot box, built through labor unions, other vestiges of community that you already kind of see today. And the ultimate, result of that being a society where the balance of power, whether we're talking about in the workplace, the economy writ large, is organized in a way that is actually empowering the average working class person in all facets of their lives. So really, just democratic socialism, if I were asked to give a really short definition
Sure.
of what it is the redistribution of power as well as wealth and the labor that goes into creating wealth as well.
And to me, what it really comes down to is ensuring that all of our systems and our facets of society are democratized, where we have a real democracy in not just our political systems, but in our workplaces. Because, we go and vote one day a year, but the rest of the time we're working, and most workers don't have the opportunity to elect their managers. Their management leaves, and then that gets put in place without their consent, without their input in it. So democratic socialism for me is about ensuring that the worker, the working class, the people have a direct say in every aspect of their life and in every decision that is going to affect their lives.
How did you personally arrive where you are politically?
For me, I actually have a funny story. I was actually raised very conservative. I was raised Republican. I was born in Cuba. I came over to the U.S. when I was around 2 or 3 years old, and my parents raised me very conservatively, very anti-socialist for most of my life. And then what opened my eyes is around the time that I got to college, I made a lot of friends who had families who were refugees from the Middle East, and they directly saw U.S. bombs landing in their neighbors' homes. They saw the violence of U.S. imperialism directly in their faces, the losses that they faced, and then they had to come here to try to seek a better life, safer, where they wouldn't be bombs. And that was the start of it, of trying to see the international impact of the U.S. But then what really cemented it for me was 2020, during the Black Lives Matter protests, seeing really the brutality of systemic injustice within our policing system, where millions of people were asking for change, for something different, for Black Americans, for brown Americans to not have to fear walking down the street and potentially getting killed.
Some 5+ years ago,
Yeah.
and so you were were you already identifying yourself as a democratic socialist back in 2021?
Yeah, so actually I think I've identified as a democratic socialist since about 2019.
So that's it's not ground floor for the movement, but in terms of the public facing of it, it's pretty early days.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think what I like to say is democratic socialism was something that, after time I learned was kind of born within me. So I'm the son of Ghanaian immigrants. After Ghana actually got its independence, it was led by Kwame Nkrumah, the famous African revolutionary and believer in Pan-African socialism. So being able to learn about the history of, the country that I came from, some of the impacts of, international imperialism, not just from the U.S., because, we were actually a former colony of the United Kingdom.
Right.
Alongside really just when I was about 14, I'm 24 now. I actually started to get involved in local government.
Were your parents, because we tend to start off, because we don't know what the heck we're talking about, thinking we just take what dad told me, and then at school I regurgitate it until we are old enough to figure out what we really believe. That's sort of the life cycle. But at 14, was that what you were getting from your parents, or was that a split from them, like sort of Mars ended up doing?
I mean, I don't think it was really a split as much as, over the course of time, you sometimes start to lose touch with the sentiments in which you were, raised within.
Yeah. Get your own consciousness.
Exactly. I think, like, for example, there are a lot of people that, because the Democratic Socialism of America, we're about 120,000 folks across the country, but there are plenty of folks, that would probably call themselves Democratic Socialists that are not a part of the organization. So, I'd say that, like, many of the ideals that I was raised with were, the ideals of democratic socialism, in that, having a rooted, ethos of justice, equity, and it being, more than just words, being something that you actually, you are able to put into action and live through in your values every single day.
So we'll take a break, and then I'll start ticking down through like law enforcement, healthcare, economy, or what have you. But, my first one is, what makes you think it can work? Like, is it a set of ideals to aspire to, and it's a little bit more abstract, or of all the things that are, say, on the most recent platform, are those, the hope is to make it all concrete? You understand what I meant?
Yeah, I think that, not to put too much of a history hat on, but those are...
Are you going to teach me? Teach me.
Those are many of the same things that one, in the transition from feudalism to capitalism would have told you, in the ability of, like, oh, I don't think that, this whole entire concept of, doing away with cottage labor...
I didn't say I didn't think it was... I was saying, do you view it as sort of like an aspirational thing that's a little more abstract that you just aspire to, or do you think we as a nation or a people will get to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that there are a set of goals to aspire and like move towards. I would say in some ways they are like a set of demands that the general body really is able to have some consensus.
I think because right now what we see, especially from establishment Democrats, is this refutal of Trump, right? Of saying we're not Trump, but they're not presenting an actual vision for the future, where DSA is presenting a vision for the future. And I don't think this is anything that's abstract or idealist, as in many times it's propagandized to be, because a lot of us practice socialism within our very lives when we're building our values on one that is based on community, that is based on true equality and freedom and empowerment of the people. I don't think that there is anything that is idealistic of that, because frankly, capitalism has only existed for 400 years. For most of human life, we did exist under socialism, where we were helping each other out, and there wasn't powers above us, at least to this extent.
About it, in the modern world, is there a country that you can model on? Is there a place on Earth where this is happening successfully?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's happening successfully in parts, but I think there also is a lot of nuance that is happening. Let's look, I know this is not exactly modern, but let's look at Chile in 1972 when they elected a democratic socialist, Salvador Allende, and he put in programs that were empowering the labor unions, that was bringing health care to Chileans across the nation. And it was an incredibly successful socialist platform that came through democratic processes. There was now a revolution there. And then the U.S. funded a coup by Pinochet to get him out of office. And after Pinochet came into power, 3,000 Chileans were murdered under his regime. In Cuba, I am a product of the healthcare system of Cuba. I had a life-saving surgery at 6 months old that my parents were able to telling me to have, and my parents didn't have to pay a cent on that. It was completely free. I'm alive. I'm sitting in this room right now because of the Cuban healthcare system, and we were told, we found out that same operation in the U.S. would have cost $1 million.
Right. But Cuba's a mess.
Cuba's a mess, but it's also under 70 years now of U.S. embargo, of sanctions, of a constant threat against its government, against its people. I mean, we're seeing an escalation of that now, where a couple days ago, Marco Rubio came out saying that the Cuban government is funding socialists across the U.S., which is we're in no position to be. Cuba is in no position to be doing that. They don't have the money for it, right? Because of the embargo, because of the sanctions, because of the constant threat. Socialism, the United States has not allowed socialism to thrive, because anytime there has been a socialist project, then we see the full might of the U.S. military.
You know what's so fascinating though? Like, and I want you to speak it, but I'll just say, because I have a lot of friends in finance. I have a lot of like uber capitalist relationships in my life, and they basically say since the New Deal and FDR that the United States has been on a steady glide path to socialism since 1932.
And now we're under fascism.
I'm just saying, like, there's a real belief that the growth of social programs since the New Deal has been so accelerating, and I'm just saying that's a really commonly held sense out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I would push back on that, where like one could talk about the programs of the New Deal, many of which, if we really look at, like, were passed because of not only the Great Depression, but like a real true documented fear of the potential of socialism in the United States. So you look at huge advocates of. So really being able to look at like the conditions in which that was actually created, but then understanding that what came after that, was a decades-long project, which actually has culminated in the moment that we're in right here, of right-wing attempts to peel back at that
neoliberalism,
and neoliberalism that we've seen arise, in the 70s and onwards, actually, of I don't think it's actually even right to say that we've been on a continued path to socialism when you look at the union density from the year of 1970 to right now, where you've had such investment in that, where you've seen the growth of private equity, where the buyouts that actually make private equity what private equity is were started in the 70s.
I'll give you a little editorial. Like, I'm in the middle class, and I the wealth gap is something that's offensive in a lot of ways. I just don't know what the way to ameliorate it is. Like, I'm in the middle. I can't pay for college, but they don't give me a full break on it. So I'm going to the last third of my life is going to be paying off my kids' loans. I get it, but at the same time, I'm not convinced that the alternative, and we'll get into the finances, that will eventually be able to grow enough and have enough revenue to execute what you want.
Well, the way I see it too, right? We have enough revenue to give Israel $20 billion over the last 3 years to go bomb children and bomb hospitals and universities in the Middle East. We are bombing schoolgirls in Iran. We have the money to do that. We have the money to give tax breaks to the 1%, to the richest people in our country. But then they're saying we don't have the money to fund our schools, to fund our healthcare programs, to fund and repair our roads and fix our infrastructure, improve our public transportation. But we have the money to go bomb people across halfway across the world.
Which I think kind of even like gives us like real good moment to invoke the paraphrase a bit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who towards the latter stages of his life actually invoked and saw himself as a avowed democratic socialist. And once you're able to, and seeing that once he was able to actually integrate tables in the South, in which people would sit to eat at, water fountains, so much and so on. He really came to understand like the economic forces behind that racism that existed, but then also understanding that to himself even saying that democratic socialism in his eyes was just a shifting in American values away from.
And if I may, really
quickly, we want to take a break.
If I may, to push back on what was said earlier too. Socialism has been propagandized throughout our entire lives, throughout the past century of American history, and even before that. But right now, we're living under a fascist government. There is not socialism in America. We are far from it. We are living under a regime that is allowing ICE agents to kill people, to terrorize communities, to split families apart. Like Johan, 26-year-old, who was killed in Maine in front of his wife, in front of his 3-year-old daughter, and that ICE agent has impunity. That is the reality of what we're living under now. So I just find it that the propagandizing of socialism to fearmonger when we are living under a literal fascist administration only serves to benefit the people who are putting us in this condition right now.
We'll pause on that. We'll take a break. A lot to process with Abdul Osmanu and Mars Rodriguez joining us here. We'll be right back.